Alright, what Castlevania game is it gonna be?
Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Really? That's awesome!
You're excited about it? Damn, I should change the game.
No, let's do Symphony of the Night. I can talk about Symphony of the Night.
Really? What do you think you can say about the game that hasn't already been said?
Oh, I can say plenty. There are a lot of game reviewers who have talked about the Castlevania series before, but I think the best reviews are done by people who actually played the games when they first came out. Since I happen to be one of those people, hopefully this review will be as informative as ones done by others, but focusing more on what I like to call the Great Castlevania Shift of 1997. With the exception of Castlevania 2, all games in the franchise fell into the same mold. 2D platformer action-adventure games where you walk from one side of the screen to the other. The hardest thing about these games was the controls. The games were notorious not for shitty controls, but for limited controls. The gameplay was all about timing and it punished you severely if you were off by even a millisecond. And while some might say they are Nintendo hard, Castlevania games were difficult on purpose, not because the game had quality control issues with the controls. It was a different age than today where a lot of games have controls that allow the player a lot of breathing room for mistakes. If you really pay attention to a lot of action-adventure games made recently, the collision detection for character attacks extend beyond the boundaries of attack's artwork. And enemy attacks may even have collision detection inside their artwork. So it can look like your character was actually hit by an attack, but the game doesn't register the damage. Anyway, enough of my rambling. Symphony of the Night marked a turning point in the Castlevania series because for the first time the controls were extremely forgiving. Alucard is graceful with every movement he makes. He can spam attacks, and he can jump much higher than any prior Castlevania protagonist could dream of. Symphony of the Night is also an action RPG, so you can kill weak enemies over and over again to level up and increase Alucard's stats. So if you have difficulties, you can power level your way through them. As much as I love the game, the honest truth is that Symphony of the Night is a very different creature than previous Castlevania games, and this upset many die-hard fans of the franchise. This is not to say the game doesn't have its challenge. Alucard starts out insanely weak, and until you get access to powerful items, if you don't pay attention you can easily die. You can also enter a code to make Alucard weaker than normal, which I can assume is there to let fans of the old school gameplay still have something to punish themselves on. It seems old news now, but Alucard was the first Castlevania hero to become an unstoppable god. Some of you may think Soma was powerful in his games, but check this shit out. Behold the power of Alucard's shield of unblockable death. Everything dies in seconds with this thing. Even Dracula can't do shit against it. It's freaking ridiculous. Seriously, after you get the shield rod and Alucard's shield, there is no reason to use any other weapon ever. And even before that, one needs only the shield rod and the iron shield to dominate. Even at the start of the game, Alucard has access to a whole bunch of spells that make the game pretty easy. The only difficult thing is trying to get them to actually work. To use spells you need to enter a fighting game style button sequence, and some of them are pretty long. I don't recall it being too difficult to do them with a PlayStation controller, but I'm having a hard time getting the sequences right using the PSP controls.
Enough of this boring crap. Talk about the story.
The story? Yeah, sorry about that. It's just when I think about Symphony of the Night, the first thing that comes to mind is how different it is from all the other games that came before it. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is a direct sequel to Castlevania Rondo of Blood. Basically, Richter Belmont has gone missing and Dracula's castle has risen in his absence. So Alucard, the son of Dracula from Castlevania 3, awakens from his self-imposed slumber to see what the hell is going on. I won't ruin the story for you if you haven't played the game, but I'll let you know the game has 4 possible endings. And after you beat the game, you have the option to play through it again as Richter Belmont and, depending on the version you have, Maria Renard. In my opinion, Symphony of the Night has one of the best storylines in the franchise because it didn't contradict any other game made before it. If anything, it united them together. It also explained Dracula's motivation for hating humans, as well as giving a reason for why Dracula's castle looked different in each game. The same can't be said for other titles, as many of their games make you ask more questions than they answer.
What are you talking about?
Well, as an example, let's use the Castlevania Game Boy games.
What, you mean Castlevania Legends?
No. Stop right there. The first rule of Castlevania chronology discussion is that we do not talk about Sonia Belmont. We pretend she doesn't exist.
Because she's a chick?
No, because her story sucks. Alucard is supposed to be her lover and Trevor is Alucard's son. Let's really think about this. If that was true, that means people like Trevor and Simon are part vampire, which definitely is not the case. Also, Castlevania Legends' plot breaks continuity for older games in the franchise, and that's why they had to throw it out of the timeline.
How does it break continuity?
Oh, let me count the ways. First of all, unless one of his followers uses really powerful magic to interfere, Dracula can only resurrect 100 years after his last death. So how can Dracula die in Sonia's game but then be around in Castlevania 3 when Trevor fights him? There's also another issue. The storyline of Castlevania 3 says that Dracula started his war on humanity shortly before the events of Castlevania 3. Trevor Belmont is actually hired by the Pope because the Pope's army was totally destroyed by Dracula's minions. Now, as we know from Symphony of the Night, the reason Dracula started this war on humanity was because his human wife Lisa was burned as a witch by townspeople. Yet Dracula was already on a murderous rampage across Wallachia before this event took place. Since the Japanese storyline of Dracula 3 indicates Dracula recently started the war, I think it's logical to assume Lisa died while Trevor Belmont was alive, which means Dracula has no reason to be sending monsters at townspeople for Sonia Belmont to fight, and Alucard has no reason to want to fight his father because he's primarily doing so to fulfill his mother's last wish. In fact, Konami themselves list Lisa's death as in 1470. Castlevania 3 is supposed to take place in 1476. Castlevania Legends is supposed to take place in 1450. Also, at the end of Symphony of the Night, the conversation Alucard has with Dracula indicates Lisa told Alucard to tell his father something, which Alucard never had the opportunity to do before Symphony of the Night. Had Alucard, as some fansites claim, been a young child when his mother died, and Dracula raised him, it seems highly unlikely Alucard wouldn't have told his father the last words of his mother. So basically, Castlevania Legends doesn't make any goddamn sense when you look at Symphony of the Night and Castlevania 3. It totally screws everything up.
But I don't understand. Konami made both games, so they should all make sense together, right?
A lot of people don't understand how some Castlevania games suck while others are insanely good because they don't realize how Konami used to be structured. Between 1996 and 2002, Konami had 3 divisions making Castlevania games: Konami Computer Entertainment Tokyo, Konami Computer Entertainment Nagoya, and Konami Computer Entertainment of Kobe. Konami Tokyo was the division that seemed to inherit most of the people who had worked on Castlevania Rondo of Blood, and their first Castlevania title was Symphony of the Night. Konami Kobe then developed 3 Castlevania ship bombs: Castlevania 64, Castlevania 64 Legacy of Darkness, and Circle of the Moon. Finally, the Nagoya division developed Castlevania Legends. A lot of people associate Koji Igarashi as the mouthpiece of the Castlevania franchise. He was the scenario writer for Symphony of the Night, and worked hard to construct a timeline of the Castlevania games to give them continuity. Unfortunately, Koji had no involvement with the games made by divisions other than Tokyo, and they basically did their own thing, and I think this accounts for why the games made by their divisions have mediocre plots compared to the ones made by Tokyo. Eventually, Konami merged Kobe and Nagoya with Tokyo, and put the franchise into the hands of Koji, which, I think, has been one of the best decisions Konami has ever made with the franchise.
Okay, so basically some Castlevania games suck because of executive meddling.
Basically, yeah. Anyway, Symphony of the Night has a special place in my heart. Way back in the mid-90s, the internet really took off because dial-up internet became pretty affordable. While I was playing Symphony of the Night as a teenager, I got stuck at one point and looked up info about the game online. I discovered a website called the Castlevania Dungeon, which in my mind is the iconic Castlevania fan site. It may not seem that amazing today, but back then, its website design was really ahead of the time. Unlike a lot of fan sites that were basically one page of text and images, the Castlevania Dungeon was organized like a book. I particularly loved the encyclopedia entries on enemies because it talked about the real-life inspiration behind the character designs and names of the monsters. I really thought it was cool how so much of the game lore descends from creative work that came before it. This inspired me to also write stories that contain homages to classic literature, ancient mythology, and pop culture. So in a way, Symphony of the Night is the game that had the most impact on my style as a writer. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is my favorite game in the franchise, and when I try to think about why that is, I find it a little hard to decipher. The plot is better than prior Castlevania games, but it's not exceptional. The gameplay is fun, but overall the game is too easy once you understand how to use overpowered items like the shield rod, so it's not that the game is challenging. I think what endears me to the game is the presentation. This is one of the prettiest 2D games in the PlayStation, and the game's soundtrack is one of the best of any Castlevania. The sound design is also really good too, and I suppose the game environments do have enough variety to keep things mixed up. Still, this isn't a game that can entertain me for more than a weekend. If you've never played Symphony of the Night, but you enjoy some of the more recent Castlevania titles, I'd encourage you to try Symphony of the Night for yourself. The game was a major turning point for the franchise, and I think it stands the test of time better than some of the other titles. Okay, I'm done with the review. Can I have my clothes back this time?
Nope.
No? Why the hell not?
Because you're not done with the Halloween special.
What? Of course I am. I just reviewed Symphony of the Night. I'm done.
Yes, but now you have to complete the review for Castlevania Curse of Darkness. This is a two-part special.
Curse of Darkness? Really? Really? I have to review Curse of Darkness now?
If you want to break the curse, then yes.